calling you to say His name. Allah is calling you to come home again. Allah is calling you. His mercy far exceeds His wrath. He wants that you stay on the path. He wants you to try your best. Avoid shaitan and pass the test. Allah is calling you. Allah is calling you to say His name. Allah is calling you to come home again. Allah is calling you. Allah is calling you. Allah is calling you to say His name. Allah is calling you to come.
24 minutes past 4 p.m. Central African time. Welcome back. You are tuned into Salam Media. It is, of course, the weekend edition of the Iftar Drive. My name is Zahid Jadwat, and I'll be keeping you company up until around 6 o'clock this evening. Now, after our first interview for this afternoon, and that, of course, is a very interesting conversation coming up with a registered dietitian. Her name is Faaizah Laher, and she joins us virtually now. Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the show.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me on today.
It is a pleasure to have you this afternoon, and I do apologize for the technical difficulties that we were having just a short while ago. But let's just dive right into it. I think let's begin with a brief overview, an explanation of how fasting during Ramadan affects the body, and how we then, we'll then move the conversation over to how important it is to maintaining a healthy diet during this time of fasting.
So during the time of fasting, our body's requirements change drastically. Our fluids needs change. The types of foods that we eat affects our body in different ways. So firstly, during our fasting time or during the fasting day, the body's sources of energy go from glycogen between the muscles to sometimes using muscle mass as energy if we're not fueled properly, or very occasionally using fat mass. And then the fluid status of our bodies change because depending also on the weather, it depends on, if we're underhydrated or if we're well hydrated, this will all impact how the day is going to play out. So are we going to feel very lethargic, very tired, very sleepy? So it's important to look at what we're eating and how this is going to affect us for the fasting day.
All right. So when we look at what we need to be eating, what are some of the foods that we are, we ought to now look towards, to consume more often or in greater proportions than we usually would? And what are some of the foods that we should actually be avoiding during this time?
So remember, firstly, Ramadan is a great opportunity for us to break the chains of some of our bad eating habits. But the majority of people don't reap the full benefits of this month. So we need to make sure that we fully benefit from the fasting by putting a great deal into the thought of the types and the quality and the quantity of food that we're going to be eating. We want to ensure that and this I can't stress enough, is the importance of eating a balanced plate. So we want to focus on a lot of vegetables, a lot of fruit, enough lean protein, and then also enough slow digesting carbohydrate that will give us the slow release of energy throughout the day or the evening, and make sure that we eat, and then make sure that our energy levels are maintained throughout the day.
And it's important that you mention the necessity of having that balance, right? So in Ramadan, I think what people generally tend to do, or what tends to happen, is you have two extremes, or at least I've noticed this is where you have two extremes, where you have, on one hand, you've got people who are, for whatever reason, would choose not to wake up for suhoor. And then you've got people who would then overeat as well. So personally, I'm not one of those people who's able to eat that much in the morning. But then you've got people, who would eat entire meals when it comes to suhoor, and the same thing goes for iftar as well. So how do we, get this balance, and be able to avoid overeating and overconsumption?
So remember, the most important key word here is balance, and that's what we're trying to strive for. And I think balance is really important in Islam, because anything, we don't want to overdo or underdo anything that we're striving to achieve. So in terms of suhoor, you want to make sure that you're having at least something, because remember, the days are getting relatively longer, and in terms of fueling our bodies and that release of energy, and the productive and the sort of day that you still want to have in terms of productivity at work or at school, this is only, we're only going to be able to achieve that through the food that we eat. So try to have something in the morning at Seri, at least maybe a small balanced smoothie, or even, a quick scrambled egg on toast, or even, a cereal that you quite enjoy is will also suffice. But for people who just start their fast off with dates and water, unfortunately, that's not enough protein to start the day, because we find that a lot of our patients who visit our practices, they lose a lot of muscle mass during the month because they don't fuel their bodies effectively. And muscle mass is something that we want to hold on to, because remember, it's going to dictate our metabolism, it's going to dictate what our immune system is going to look like. We want to ensure that we have adequate amounts of protein, adequate amounts of slow digesting carbohydrate, and then also enough, fruits and veg, to make sure that we prevent things like constipation, tummy upsets during the month.
Yes, of course. And I think that word balance you mentioned earlier, very important. And we keep coming around to this as well. Now, looking at, just to drive the message home about the importance of having this balance, and of being able to make sure that you have the correct nutrient intake. Um, can you maybe tell us, what are the side effects of not being cautious? What are the dangers? What do we tend to lose? Or, what's the risks associated with, just recklessly just eating whatever and not paying much attention to a healthy diet during Ramadan?
So I think in our community, one of the big issues is the issue of the diabetic pandemic and the overweight. We have a lot of individuals who are overweight and who have subsequently are diabetic, and this becomes a problem, especially because now it's slowly becoming part of our genetics. So it's really important that we look at what we eat and we fuel our bodies appropriately, because some of these lifestyle diseases, they stay with us for a long time, and then the complications from that are quite extreme, and are quite, we could have they all could have been avoided and prevented. But not to say that you should not be having some of your favorite foods at iftar, like for example your samosas or a pie, or I don't know, the different items that people like to have, which are traditionally part of our lives and our diets. So instead of having a whole plate of fried savories, think of starting your iftar with two savories, and then following it on with a healthy, a decent, balanced plate, as we spoke about earlier, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for a nutrient dense diet, not a calorie dense diet. And then you'll find that as the days go on in Ramadan, you'll maintain your energy levels. You'll have your body will stay strong, especially when we want to reach those last 10 nights of Ramadan. We want to be strong. You want to be able to stand in Salah. And it's only our diet, as we fuel ourselves, that's going to get us there.
Yes, of course. That's quite an interesting and important point that you make right there. Let's look at some of the people now who, they've been on diets before Ramadan. It's become part of their lifestyle. Now, how do they keep on track with these diets and their goals when it comes to, during Ramadan?
So what they can do is shift their morning food to sehri, and then take their suppers and keep them as is for iftar. So what this would mean is you can go as big as you want for suhoor or for sehri, because remember, this is your fuel for the upcoming day. So you can still do, an egg on toast with avocado. You can still do peanut butter. You can still do um, oats and berries and milk or yogurt. You can do a yogurt and muesli bowl. So those are quite some those are a few nutritious examples of what we can have in the morning. They're all, relatively high in protein. They will keep you going throughout the day, and they will still complement to that healthy or the diet that you were on pre-Ramadan. And then iftar, remember, keeping those fried items to a minimum. So starting your meal off with something healthy. You could do pitas and hummus and yogurt, or you could do dips like olive tapenade on a slice of bread, or and then follow that on with something that you would have usually eaten before Ramadan. So it could be a piece of chicken with veg and maybe a roti. It could be a little bit of chicken curry and some coleslaw on the side. So in that way, we're fitting in all our healthy foods, all the foods that you're used to, but you still feel satisfied, and you still feel, like you've eaten something that appeals to your taste buds.
Does it still have the same effect though? When you make those adjustments, or are there any dramatic effects that you should be on the lookout for when it comes to your actual diet that you've been following for, say, several months before Ramadan?
So the one problem we do have is, like you said, you also lose your appetite in Ramadan. So if you lose your appetite, keep an eye on that. A typical symptom of that would be you feel fatigued and you feel tired all the time. So if you're feeling that way, look at what you're eating. Try and keep a food diary for a few days, and note down what have you eaten for sehri, what have you eaten for iftar, and then you can adjust accordingly, because that's one of the most important, or the quickest way to do it without having to come out to a dietitian. So look at what you've written, look at what you've eaten, and then perhaps add on or take away, once you've established what you need to do. Make sure you're drinking enough fluids and enough water between iftar and suhoor. So, you still want to get in at a minimum of 1.5 liters, and getting in enough fluid will help to prevent a lot of ailments like kidney stones and constipation, dehydration, headaches, etc.
All right, and then just finally, some general tips or advice that you might have for people looking to maintain a healthy diet during Ramadan.
So the key is balance. Include the foods that you love in smaller quantities, those that are not that great, maybe a little high in sugar, or, high in salt, and then follow on with what you're used to eating before Ramadan. Remember that, what we eat is going to set the tempo of our ibadat. It's going to set the pace of the day and the night. And in order to make it to the end of the month strong and healthy, we want to make sure that we're fueling our bodies adequately.
All right, we'll leave it at that. Shukran so much for your time.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Faaizah Laher is a registered dietitian speaking to us about ways you can be able to have a healthy diet during the month of Ramadan. Of course, one of those important conversations that we must and we should continue having over and over. It doesn't really get exhausted, to be honest. Nonetheless, let's take a break. On the other side of it, however, we look at the situation with banking seems to be in the news once again.